For 20 years, Ethan Carter believed the woman he loved had died in a fiery crash that sent her car into Raven Lake. The police recovered the burned vehicle, but her body was never found. Everyone called it a tragic accident, and eventually Ethan forced himself to move on. He raised his young son alone, buried his pain beneath long days at his auto repair shop, and never imagined the past would return. Then, on a stormy afternoon at the city's train station, everything changed. Across the crowded platform stood a woman with the same piercing blue eyes, the same nervous habit of brushing hair behind her ear. It was his wife, alive. Before Ethan could reach her, she whispered for chilling words. "Don't say my name. They're watching." Standing beside her was a young woman about 20 years old whose face looked strangely familiar. When their eyes met, Ethan felt his heart stop. She carried the same smile he saw every morning in the mirror. Who was she? Why had his wife stayed hidden for 2 decades? And who was powerful enough to make a dead woman spend 20 years running for her life? Ethan had no idea that the answers would destroy everything he believed about his family. Ethan followed the 2 women into the pouring rain, ignoring the traffic and shouting around him. "Emily? How is this possible?" he asked, barely able to breathe. She refused to answer. Instead, she kept scanning the street until her eyes locked onto a dark SUV parked across the road. Its windows were completely tinted. "We can't stay here," she whispered. "Someone could be watching." Confused but desperate for answers, Ethan drove them to an old warehouse behind his repair garage, a place no one else knew about. Silence filled the room before the young woman finally spoke. "Mom, is he really my father?" The question hit Ethan harder than anything else that day. Emily slowly admitted the truth. On the night everyone believed she had died, she had secretly been pregnant. She never got the chance to tell Ethan before her world fell apart. The young woman introduced herself as Lena Brooks. For 20 years, she had believed her father died before she was born. Only a few days earlier had her mother confessed that he was alive. Ethan wanted to believe every word, but 20 years of grief couldn't disappear in a single afternoon. "I need proof," he said firmly. Emily nodded without arguing. "You deserve the truth," she replied. "But once I tell you everything, there's no turning back." Emily wrapped both hands around a cup of untouched coffee before finally speaking. 20 years ago, I discovered evidence that someone inside my family's corporation was stealing millions through fake companies, she said quietly. The man behind it wasn't a stranger. It was my own uncle, Victor Hale. She had gathered documents and planned to hand everything over to federal investigators. But before she could act, an envelope appeared outside her home. Inside were recent photographs of Ethan and their little son, taken without their knowledge. "It wasn't a warning," Emily said. "It was proof they could reach you whenever they wanted." Days later, a trusted family security advisor offered her an impossible choice. If she truly wanted to protect Ethan and their child, she had to disappear completely. A fake car crash was staged at Raven Lake, allowing the world to believe she was dead, while she escaped under a new identity. Emily thought she would only stay hidden for a few months. Those months became years. Then years became 2 decades. Looking directly into Ethan's eyes for the first time, she whispered, "Every single day, I wanted to come back. But every time I tried, someone stopped me." Ethan clenched his fists. "If that's true," he said, "then whoever destroyed our family is going to answer for it." Emily reached into her bag and carefully placed an old photograph on the table. It showed Ethan walking their 3-year-old son into preschool. "I never stopped watching over you," she whispered. "Whenever I could, I made sure you were safe." Ethan stared at the picture, struggling to understand how someone declared dead could have secretly followed their lives for so many years. Then Emily revealed another secret. "I wrote hundreds of letters to you," she said. "Every birthday, every anniversary, every Christmas. But none of them ever reached you. Someone had intercepted every message. That was when Lena quietly slid a small flash drive across the table. I found this hidden among my mother's old belongings, she said. She told me to protect it with my life. Inside were encrypted financial records, private emails, and scanned documents linking Victor Hale to years of fraud, money laundering, and forged company records. It was enough evidence to destroy his empire. Before anyone could say another word, a loud engine echoed outside. Headlights swept across the warehouse windows. A black SUV had stopped just beyond the gate. Emily's face instantly turned pale. "They found us," she whispered. Ethan switched off the lights, grabbed the flash drive, and motioned for everyone to stay silent. Someone slowly stepped out of the SUV and began walking toward the warehouse door. The warehouse door creaked open. Ethan tightened his grip on an old steel wrench while Lena quickly hid the flash drive inside a dusty toolbox. Every heartbeat echoed through the silent building. A tall man stepped inside with his hands raised. "Relax," he said calmly. "If I wanted to hurt you, you wouldn't have heard me coming." Emily's face froze. "Daniel." It was Daniel Cross, the former head of security for her family's company. 20 years earlier, everyone believed he had vanished without a trace. "I've been hiding for the same reason Emily has," he explained. "Victor has people in banks, police departments, and even private investigators. Anyone who got close to the truth either disappeared or was paid to stay quiet." Daniel pulled a small envelope from his jacket. "I've kept this safe for 20 years. Inside was the original legal document proving that Victor had illegally seized control of the family business after Emily was declared dead. Combined with the flash drive, it was enough to expose everything. But before they could celebrate, Daniel's phone vibrated. He looked at the screen, and the color drained from his face. "They know where we are," he whispered. At that exact moment, multiple black SUVs surrounded the warehouse, and powerful headlights flooded every entrance. Victor wasn't waiting anymore. He had come personally to erase the last witnesses forever. The warehouse erupted into chaos as armed security guards surrounded every exit. Bright floodlights pierced through the dusty windows while Victor Hale stepped out of the lead SUV with a smug smile. "It's over, Emily," he called out. "Hand me the evidence, and maybe your family walks away." Ethan looked at Daniel, who quietly shook his head. "They're bluffing," Daniel whispered. "Victor doesn't want witnesses. Once we surrender, none of us leave." Instead of giving up, Ethan remembered an old underground service tunnel beneath the garage, built decades earlier for storm drainage. He quickly led Emily, Lena, and Daniel through the narrow passage just seconds before the warehouse doors crashed open. By the time Victor's men searched the building, it was empty. The group emerged several blocks away and drove straight to Assistant U.S. Attorney Rebecca Collins, one of the few officials Daniel still trusted. Rebecca carefully reviewed the flash drive, the original ownership documents, and Daniel's sworn statement. After nearly an hour of silence, she looked up and said, "This is more than corporate fraud. If these records are authentic, Victor Hale has committed crimes that could send him to prison for the rest of his life." But before federal agents could act, Rebecca received an urgent phone call. Her expression changed instantly. "The court hearing has been moved to tomorrow morning," she said. "Victor is trying to finalize the company takeover before we can stop him." They had less than 12 hours left to expose the truth. By sunrise, the federal courthouse was surrounded by reporters, lawyers, and company executives. Victor Hale walked inside with complete confidence, believing he had already won. Minutes before the hearing began, Ethan, Emily, Lena, Daniel, and attorney Rebecca Collins entered the courtroom carrying the evidence that had been hidden for 20 years. Victor smirked. "You really think a few old papers can destroy everything I've built?" Rebecca calmly handed the judge the original ownership agreement, Daniel's sworn testimony, and the encrypted financial records recovered from the flash drive. One by one, The documents exposed forged signatures, stolen pension funds, fake companies, and years of financial fraud. The courtroom fell silent. Victor's own board members slowly stood and announced they were withdrawing their support. Moments later, federal agents stepped forward with an arrest warrant. Victor Hale, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. For the first time in 20 years, Victor had nothing to say. Months later, the stolen money was returned to the employees. The company was placed under independent management, and Emily chose not to reclaim her old position. Instead, she focused on rebuilding the family she had lost. Ethan and Emily didn't pretend 20 years of pain could disappear overnight, but they agreed to begin again, this time with honesty instead of secrets. One evening, as Ethan and Lena finished restoring an old classic car together, she smiled and quietly said, "I'm proud to call you Dad." Ethan smiled back, knowing that although the past could never be changed, the future was finally theirs to write. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more emotional justice stories.